Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Your support is greatly appreciated. Quick question. Where are you tuning in from today? Which city? Which country? Drop it below. Now let's jump into today's story. Let's dive into today's story. Hawthorne Manor's west wing cast long shadows across the polished oak floors as Nathan Hawthorne's footsteps softened on the Persian rug leading to his study. His thoughts were consumed by the quarterly reports he had been analyzing. A burst of laughter echoed through the slightly ajar door. His wife, Evelyn's unmistakable voice mingled with a rich, masculine chuckle, halting him mid-step. "That diamond necklace he bought me for our anniversary." Evelyn's tone held a biting edge Nathan had never heard before. "Cost nearly 40,000. And he thought I'd be thrilled. As if I needed more sparkly baubles to play the perfect wife." Ice filled Nathan's veins as he edged closer, his briefcase slipping from his grip. Through the crack, he caught Evelyn's reflection in the ornate Victorian mirror. Her figure reclined gracefully on his leather Chesterfield, her designer heels kicked off. A crystal glass of whiskey shimmered in her hand. "You've always had expensive taste, Ev," said Victor Wallace, his deep laugh carrying a hint of smugness. "But hey, that's why we picked him, right? Nathan Hawthorne, self-made tech tycoon, lonely and ripe for the taking after poor Catherine's tragic accident." The glass decanter on Nathan's desk refracted light across the walls as his world tilted. Catherine. Her name stabbed through his chest with a forgotten ache. Evelyn's voice interrupted his thoughts, dripping with scorn. "That fool really believes we met by chance at the charity gala. He doesn't know I planned it all, down to the dress that would catch his eye. You should have seen him, Vic, hook, line, and sinker." Victor's chuckle deepened. "You're a genius at the long con, Ev. Remember how Grace helped you orchestrate that night?" Evelyn's laughter rang sharp, her lips brushing the rim of her glass. "And staging that accident for Catherine? Poetry in motion. The rainstorm, the brake failure. It was flawless." Nathan's knees weakened as memories surged. Catherine's hospital room, the endless police reports, the despair that consumed him. And Evelyn? The glamorous woman who had collided into his life that fateful night. And those kids he loves so much? Evelyn sneered. "All yours, Vic. They've known for years, but stay quiet until he signs. Over the trust funds. Even Jason's manipulation is an art now. He upped his allowance last week." Victor moved into view, his face smug as he perched on Nathan's desk. "Like father, like son. It's been hard watching them call him dad. Remember how worried we were they'd inherit my looks?" Evelyn scoffed. "Nathan sees what he wants to see, even when Jason mirrors your mannerisms." The sound of ice clinking broke the silence as Nathan's mind raced. Birth certificates, doctored records, Victor's constant presence. Everything fell into place. "How much longer?" Victor asked. "Just a few weeks," Evelyn purred, setting down her glass. "He's busy planning that ridiculous anniversary party." Nathan's fists clenched as the weight of betrayal bore down on him. The study filled with muffled movement as their masks slipped back on. As their chef passed with a tea tray, Nathan retreated silently, his mind calculating with the precision that had built his empire. He made his way to his private garden retreat, now shrouded in darkness, piecing together years of manipulation. The lights from the manor glowed warmly in the distance, a stark contrast to the cold realization overtaking him. Nathan stared out the window of his study, where he could see the silhouettes of his wife and best friend moving about, likely preparing to play their parts in another family gathering. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Evelyn. "Darling, are you working late again? Marcus has prepared your favorite risotto." Nathan read the message, recognizing for the first time the subtle manipulation in her words, the practiced way she played on his guilt for working too much. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard before typing a response that would buy him time to think. "Important client call. Start without me." The reply came swiftly. "Don't work too hard, my love. We'll save you a plate." Each word was a dagger, every term of endearment a calculated lie. As darkness settled over the estate, Nathan Hawthorne, the man who had built his fortune from nothing, began to plan. He would need time, resources, and, above all, the ability to keep a flawless poker face. Tomorrow, he would begin his own long game, But for now, in the solitude of his garden retreat, he allowed himself a single moment of grief. For the life he thought he had, the love he believed was real, and the children he had cherished as his own. A solitary tear slipped down his cheek, quickly wiped away as he squared his shoulders and tapped into the ruthless determination that had built his empire. The foundation of lies had cracked, and through the fissures, Nathan finally saw the truth. The question now was what he would rebuild from the ruins of his shattered world. The week that followed was an exercise in deception that might have impressed Evelyn had she known. Each morning, he kissed her goodbye with the same tenderness of 17 years, suppressing the bile rising with every touch of his lips to her cheek. Each evening, he endured family dinners, watching his children. No, Victor's children, with sharpened clarity, noting every mannerism that betrayed their true heritage. The private executive suite at the Metropolitan Plaza Hotel provided the secrecy Nathan required for his meeting with Kelly McCarty. The former FBI agent's reputation for discretion had cost him dearly, but as she spread documents across the mahogany conference table, he knew it was money well spent. Your wife's real name is Dana McMillan, Kelly began without hesitation, laying down photographs like a poker dealer in a high-stakes game. She's been involved in 3 similar cons across the country. The earliest case we traced was in Seattle, 2001. Nathan picked up one photo showing a younger Evelyn, or rather Dana, with darker hair and modest attire, leaning on the arm of an unfamiliar man. What happened to him? He asked quietly. Lost everything, Kelly replied matter-of-factly. She and her partner drained him over 2 years, then vanished. He had a breakdown, lost his company, and moved to Alaska to start over. Her partner? Nathan questioned, picking up another photo. Victor Wallace. Real name Dennis Maddox, Kelly corrected, sliding over a thick file. They met at Stanford, dropped out together, and have been partners ever since. She seduces the targets. He plays the supportive friend. Together, they isolate and dismantle their victims' lives. Nathan's hand hovered over the file, his mind racing through years of memories. Who else is involved? Kelly pulled out another stack of documents, each one revealing familiar faces that twisted the knife further. Grace Fields, supposedly your wife's best friend? She's actually Grace Maddox, Dennis' sister. Her role is to research the target's preferences and help Dana craft the perfect persona to ensnare them. And about Marlene's accident. Nathan's voice faltered at the mention of his late fiancée. Kelly's tone softened slightly. We found evidence linking Grace to the mechanic who worked on Marlene's car. The brake lines were tampered with professionally, impossible to prove in court at the time. Nathan turned to the window, staring out at the city skyline, a reminder of the empire he had built, only to be so thoroughly deceived in his private life. And my staff? He asked, his voice tight. Who else is part of this scheme? Kelly tapped her laptop, revealing financial records. Your assistant, Hannah Wise, has been on their payroll from the start, feeding them information about your schedule, decisions, and even your emotional state. Dr. Toby Young, your family physician, falsified all 3 children's birth records. We traced significant payments to an offshore account in his name for each birth. Nathan stood abruptly, moving to the window. His reflection stared back, and for the first time, he barely recognized the man he saw. Nathan Hawthorne, the confident tech magnate, was gone, replaced by a man who appeared older, harder, but resolutely determined. Show me everything, every detail, every connection, every cent they've stolen, he demanded. Over the next 3 hours, Kelly methodically unfolded the intricate web of deception. Bank records revealed a labyrinth of shell companies, all routing money to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Surveillance photos captured secret meetings between Evelyn and Victor at discrete locations around the city. Text messages, obtained through means Kelly advised were best left unspoken, exposed the calculated nature of their long-running con. There's something else you need to know, Kelly said, sliding one last file across the table. We've been tracking their recent activity, and it seems they're preparing for their endgame. Large sums of money are being moved, properties discreetly listed for sale, and communication with their Cayman contacts has increased. They're planning to leave, Nathan stated rather than asked. Yes, Kelly confirmed. after the trust funds are signed over next month. But there's a complication they're unaware of. A flicker of satisfaction crossed her face. Someone else has been watching them, gathering evidence of their own. Someone who might be willing to help us take them down. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Who? Stephanie Brady, Kelly replied, sliding over a photograph of a composed, elegant woman Nathan recognized from countless social gatherings. Victor's wife. And from what we've discovered, she has quite a story to tell. As Nathan stared at the photograph, he felt the first stirrings of hope. Perhaps he wasn't as isolated in this battle as he had feared. What's our next move? He asked, straining his posture. Kelly began packing her documents with methodical precision. For now, maintain your routine. Don't give them any reason to suspect you know. I'll arrange a secure meeting with Stephanie Brady, and we'll start building the case. But Nathan, she paused, her tone firm. Remember that these people are dangerous. They've destroyed lives before, and they won't hesitate to destroy yours if they realize you're onto them. Nathan nodded, his jaw tightening. They've already destroyed my life, Kelly. Now it's my turn to destroy theirs. As he exited the hotel through a service entrance, carefully scanning for signs of surveillance, Nathan felt an unfamiliar calm. The initial shock and anguish of betrayal were being replaced by something colder and more calculating. He had built his company from nothing, defeated corporate raiders, and thwarted countless attempts to undermine his success. Now he would harness that same unyielding resolve to dismantle the carefully constructed facade that had defined his life. His phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn. Don't forget, darling, we have dinner with the Wallaces tonight. Victor has some exciting new investment opportunities to discuss. Nathan allowed himself a small, knowing smile as he typed his reply. Wouldn't miss it for the world, my love. The game was on, and this time, he knew the true faces of every player. The Riverside Cafe, nestled against the city's waterfront, offered a nostalgic contrast with its Art Deco design standing out amidst modern glass towers. Nathan chose a corner table, positioning himself to watch both the main entrance and the kitchen door. Stephanie Brady's message, sent through Kelly's secure channel, was direct. I know everything. I've been gathering evidence for years. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe. He watched her enter, noting how different she appeared outside her usual social circles. Gone were the designer dresses and flawless hairstyles marking her as Victor Wallace's wife. Instead, she wore simple jeans and a sweater, her dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail. Her cautious gaze swept the room with an efficiency born of long practice. Thank you for meeting me, Stephanie said quietly as she slid into the seat across from him, her hands trembling slightly as she set her purse on the table. I've been trying to figure out how to approach you for months. Nathan studied her face for any signs of deception. As Victor's wife, this could be another layer to their scheme. But the exhaustion etched in her features and the nervous glances toward the door betrayed genuine fear. How long have you known? He asked, keeping his tone low. Stephanie wrapped her hands around the coffee cup just delivered by the waitress, as if drawing strength from his warmth. From the beginning, Victor Dennis really, that's his real name, wasn't as careful with me as he should have been. I discovered their plan about 6 months into our marriage. But by then, she closed her eyes briefly. By then, I was already pregnant with our first child. Anger surged through Nathan as he absorbed her words. And you never said anything? What could I say? Stephanie's voice cracked. They made it clear what would happen if I interfered. I had my daughter to think about. So I played my part, the devoted wife, the perfect hostess at their dinner parties. But I never stopped watching, never stopped collecting evidence. She reached into her purse and retrieved a small USB drive, sliding it across the table with unsteady fingers. Everything's here. Recordings of their private conversations, financial records, emails. Years of documentation. Victor thinks he's untouchable, but he never expected his own wife to turn against him. Nathan picked up the drive, his grip firm. Why now? Nathan asked, not reaching for the drive yet. What's changed? Stephanie's eyes darted to the door before meeting his. Because they're preparing for their endgame, and I can't. I won't let them destroy another family. They've done this before, Nathan. 3 times before you. I've tracked down their other victims, gathered their stories. The pattern is always the same, isolation, manipulation, then total destruction. A waiter approached their table, and they fell silent until their orders were taken, and he walked away. Nathan used the pause to process what he'd heard, studying the woman across from him with new eyes. He had always thought of Stephanie as quiet, even unremarkable, the perfect counterbalance to Victor's outgoing nature. Now he realized it was all an act, a carefully cultivated invisibility that allowed her to observe without drawing attention. "Tell me about the children," he said finally, the words cutting like glass. Stephanie's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "They're innocent in all of this, Nathan. Yes, they're biologically Victor's, but you're the only real father they've ever known." She hesitated, then continued. "Victor sees them as assets, pieces in his game. The way he's manipulated and threatened them to keep their silence. It's monstrous." She pulled out her phone, quickly typing something before showing him the screen. It was a text conversation with Jason, his eldest, from several months prior. "Uncle Victor says if I don't convince Dad to increase the trust fund, he'll make sure I never see Emma and Michael again. Please help." Nathan's fists clenched under the table. "How many more messages like this are there?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dozens," Stephanie replied. "Victor uses their love for each other as leverage. They're terrified of being separated. That's why they play along, why they uphold the lie. But it's destroying them, especially Jason. He has nightmares, his grades are slipping, and Evelyn and Victor." She shook her head in disgust. "They just tell him to toughen up, to remember what's at stake." The cafe had grown busier, the hum of conversation providing a shield for their low voices. Nathan's gaze wandered to a nearby table where a family laughed over a shared meal, and a deep ache settled in his chest. "I need to know everything," he said finally, reaching for the USB drive. "Every detail, every connection, every person involved in their scheme. And I need to know what you want in return for your help." Stephanie's laugh was bitter. "Freedom. For me, for my daughter, for your children." She hesitated, then added, "Our children, really, since we're both raising Victor's kids. I want out, Nathan. I want a life free from the manipulation and lies." Her voice steadied. "I want justice. Not just for us, but for everyone they've hurt." Nathan nodded, pocketing the drive. "It won't be easy. They'll fight back when they realize what we're doing." "I know," Stephanie said, her voice firm. "But I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of watching them destroy lives while I stay silent. Whatever you're planning, I want in. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Promise me you'll protect the children. Whatever happens, whatever we uncover, they're the real victims here. They deserve a chance at a normal life, away from all the lies and games." Nathan thought of Jason's haunted expression at breakfast, the forced smiles from Emma when Evelyn hugged her, and Michael's quiet withdrawal whenever Victor was near. "I promise," he said, and for the first time since overhearing that damning conversation, a sense of purpose began to take hold. "We'll protect them. All of them." As they finished their coffee and prepared to leave, Stephanie first, Nathan after a careful interval, they began laying the groundwork for their counterattack. Neither could predict how their plan would unfold, but by the quiet riverside, something had shifted. The cracks in the foundation of lies were widening, and through them, the truth was finally beginning to emerge. The 42nd floor of the Chrysler Building offered a sweeping view of Manhattan. Nathan's attention, however, was fixed on the documents spread across the conference room table, each piece a puzzle fragment he was painstakingly assembling. Jessie Chambers, the corporate lawyer renowned for her precision in high-stakes cases, stood at the head of the table, her tailored suit sharp as her reputation. "Walk me through it again," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the tension in his posture. "Every detail matters." Julie Willard, the forensic accountant he had hired, nodded and projected a complex diagram onto the main screen. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she explained. "It's sophisticated, in a twisted way," she admitted, her gaze following the flow of money through a web of shell companies. "Over the past 17 years, they've funneled millions through a labyrinth of fake corporations and offshore accounts." The screen filled with transaction records, each one a quantified betrayal. Julie pointed to a particularly intricate series of transfers. "See this pattern? Every major business decision you made, every successful venture, They had a shadow operation running parallel to it. That's why Hannah's position as your assistant was so crucial. She gave them advance notice of every move you were planning. Jessie stepped closer to the screen, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The real genius was how they structured the children's trust funds, she said, pulling up another document. Each fund is set up with a series of trigger clauses. Once activated, they can drain the accounts completely within hours, transferring everything to their Cayman Islands holdings. Nathan's jaw tightened as he studied the numbers. And they're planning to do this next month? According to the documentation Stephanie provided, yes, Julie confirmed, pulling up another screen of data. They've already started positioning their assets. Look at these property listings in the Caymans, all purchased through shell companies, all ready for immediate occupancy. But that's not even the worst part, Jessie interjected, her voice hard. Showing the insurance policies. Julie's expression darkened as she brought up a new set of documents. They've taken out multiple life insurance policies on you over the years, Nathan. All perfectly legal on the surface. After all, you're a key executive, and it's standard for businesses to ensure their leadership. But these policies, she trailed off, letting the implications hang in the air. They were planning my death, Nathan finished, his voice flat. The morning sun streaming through the windows suddenly felt cold. Not just planning it, Jessie corrected. According to Stephanie's recordings, they've already made 2 attempts. That skiing accident last winter? The brake failure in your car 3 months ago? Those weren't accidents. Nathan recalled the terror of those moments. The sudden loss of control on the slopes, the heart-stopping failure of his car's brakes on the highway. He'd laughed it off as bad luck, even joked about needing to be more careful. Now, the memory of Evelyn's concerned face at his hospital bedside twisted. His stomach. The policies are structured to pay out triple in case of accidental death, Julie continued, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. Combined with the trust fund theft, they stood to walk away with over $500 million. And that's where we have our opening, Jessie said, a predatory smile crossing her face. Insurance fraud of this magnitude? That's federal territory. Between that and the wire fraud from their shell companies, we can build an airtight case. But we need to move carefully. Nathan stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city he had helped shape with his tech empire. Somewhere out there, Evelyn was likely playing the role of the perfect wife, while Victor maintained his facade as the loyal friend. His children, no, Victor's children, were preparing for another day of living their carefully scripted lives. What's our timeline? He asked, turning back to face his team. Julie consulted her notes. Based on their recent activities, they're planning to trigger the trust fund transfer at the next shareholders meeting. That gives us 3 weeks to put everything in place. We'll need more than just financial records, Jessie warned. Stephanie's evidence is crucial, but we need something that will break their unity, a weakness we can exploit. Nathan thought back to the subtle tensions he'd noticed between Evelyn and Victor at recent dinner parties. The way her eyes narrowed when Victor's assistant leaned too close to him while serving drinks. What if we gave them something to fight about? Jessie's eyebrows rose with interest. What do you have in mind? Evelyn may be a con artist, but she's also human, Nathan said slowly, pieces of a plan falling into place. And humans get jealous. What if Victor isn't as faithful to their partnership as she thinks? Plant evidence of affairs? Julie asked, already taking notes. Not plant, expose, Nathan corrected. Stephanie mentioned Victor has a wandering eye. What if we start documenting his indiscretions? Let Evelyn discover her partner in crime might not be as loyal as she believes. Jessie's smile widened. Create discord in their ranks. If they're fighting each other, they're more likely to make mistakes. I like it, but we'll need someone on the inside to feed them the information. Hannah, Nathan said decisively. She's been their spy for years. Let's see how she handles working for both sides. Are you sure you can trust her to play double agent? Julie asked skeptically. Nathan's expression hardened. Trust has nothing to do with it. Hannah is a survivor. She'll work for whoever she thinks is winning. Once we show her evidence of what we've uncovered, she'll understand which way the wind is blowing. We'll need to coordinate with Stephanie, Jessie added, making notes. Her position as Victor's wife gives her unique opportunities for surveillance. Already arranged, Nathan replied. She's agreed to help, but we need to move carefully. If Victor suspects she's involved, the unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. They all knew what Victor and Evelyn were capable of when cornered. There's one more thing, Julie said hesitantly, pulling up a final document. The children's accounts. Even if we stop the main theft, there are subsidiary triggers in place. If we're not careful, they could still manage to drain millions before we can freeze everything. Nathan's expression softened slightly at the mention of the children. Despite everything, he couldn't help but think of them as his own. Focus on protecting those accounts first, he ordered. Whatever happens, I won't let them steal the children's future along with everything else. Jessie began gathering her documents, her movements sharp and deliberate. I'll start drafting the legal framework. Julie, I need you to document every suspicious transaction from the past 17 years. Leave nothing unexamined. What about me? Nathan asked, though he already knew the answer. You, Jessie said firmly, need to keep playing your part. Be the loving husband, the trusting friend. Give them no reason to suspect anything's wrong. Can you do that? Nathan thought about the dinners ahead, the moments he'd have to smile and laugh with the woman who had orchestrated his destruction. I've been living a lie for 17 years, he said quietly. I can manage a few more weeks. As his team began packing up their materials, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. Darling, don't forget we have a charity board meeting tonight. Victor has some wonderful ideas for the Children's Education Fund. With steady fingers, he typed back. Looking forward to it, my love. The game was entering its final phase, and this time, Nathan intended to write the rules. Hannah Wise sat in her small office adjacent to Nathan's executive suite, her perfectly manicured nails tapping nervously on her desk. The email she just sent felt like a live wire, detailing Nathan's plans to significantly increase the children's trust funds, complete with figures and timing. It was the kind of intelligence she'd been feeding to Evelyn and Victor for years. But this time, everything was different. Her thoughts drifted back to the meeting with Nathan 3 days earlier, when he'd called her into his office and calmly laid out every detail of her betrayal. No anger, no threats, just cold precision that had been far more terrifying. You have a choice, Hannah, he'd said, sliding a folder across his desk. Keep working for them and face federal charges when this all comes down, or help me take them down and walk away clean. Either way, your days of playing both sides are over. The folder contained enough evidence to send her to prison for decades. Bank records, emails, phone logs. Every piece of information she'd ever passed to Evelyn and Victor, documented and dated. Nathan had been watching her for weeks, building his case while she thought she was safely hidden. Now, she was part of his plan, feeding carefully crafted information to the conspirators while reporting their reactions back to Nathan's team. The trust fund email was just the latest bait. Her phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Need to meet. Usual place. 1 hour. Hannah glanced at the elegant watch Nathan had gifted her last Christmas, another token she'd accepted while betraying him. She had just enough time to brief him before the meeting. Across town, Stephanie Brady was playing her own role in the unfolding plan. Sitting in her home office, ostensibly working on charity event logistics, she was instead monitoring hidden cameras she had installed months earlier. On her screen, Victor paced in his private study, his phone pressed to his ear. Are you sure about these numbers? He asked, agitation clear in his voice. That's more than we expected. If Hawthorne's planning to increase the funds that much, he paused listening. No, of course it's good news. Just unexpected. He's never been this generous with the kids before. Stephanie's fingers moved swiftly across her keyboard, transcribing every word. The cameras had been her idea, small, undetectable devices concealed in light fixtures and air vents. For months, she had been building her archive of evidence, capturing every incriminating conversation and scheme discussed in what Victor thought was the privacy of his study. But today's surveillance had a second purpose. As Victor ended his call, Stephanie pressed a button on her laptop. Right on cue, his assistant entered the study, wearing the outfit Stephanie had subtly suggested. A skirt just a little too short, a blouse just a little too revealing. Mr. Wallace, the assistant purred. I have those documents you requested. She leaned over his desk unnecessarily, ensuring the cameras captured every moment of their interaction. Stephanie felt a grim satisfaction as she recorded several minutes of compromising footage. It wasn't outright infidelity, but suggestive enough to plant seeds of doubt. This video would find its way to Evelyn through carefully orchestrated channels, adding fuel to the fire Nathan's team was stoking. Meanwhile, in a private room at the St. Regis Hotel, Evelyn was meeting with Hannah, her usually composed facade showing cracks. "These numbers," she said, tapping the printout of Hannah's email. "You're certain about them?" Hannah nodded, playing her role with precision. "Nathan's been consulting his financial advisors all week. He wants to set up additional trust funds for each child's graduate education, plus significant investment portfolios they can access at 25. "How generous of him," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "And the timing?" "He plans to announce it at the shareholders' meeting next month. Something about setting an example of corporate responsibility and family values." Hannah hesitated, then added the hook she'd been instructed to plant. "Though there is something else you should know." Evelyn's perfectly arched brows lifted slightly. "Oh, I overheard Victor's assistant on the phone yesterday," Hannah said, letting worry seep into her tone. "She was making hotel reservations. Multiple rooms, different dates, all under different names. But they were all paid for with Victor's personal credit card." The flash of anger in Evelyn's eyes was quick but unmistakable. "I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation," she said, her tone brittle. "Victor handles many of our business arrangements." "Of course," Hannah agreed smoothly. "Though it's interesting that the reservations were all at rather romantic hotels, the kind that specialize in discretion." She watched the information land, noting the subtle tightening of Evelyn's fingers around her glass. The seeds of doubt had been sown. Across the city, Nathan's plan was unfolding like a complex chess game. Jesse Chambers met with banking officials, setting up measures to track and freeze suspicious transactions. Julie Willard meticulously documented every financial move Victor and Evelyn made, building an airtight case for the prosecutors who would eventually receive it. And Nathan? He was playing the hardest role of all, maintaining his facade of ignorance. He attended business meetings with Victor, smiled at his suggestions, and acted oblivious to the growing tension between his friend and his wife. He kissed Evelyn goodbye each morning, complimented her outfits, and pretended not to notice the suspicious glances she cast in Victor's direction. The false flag operation was working perfectly. Evelyn's natural jealousy, carefully stoked by strategically leaked evidence of Victor's supposed infidelities, was creating exactly the kind of chaos they needed. She began checking his phone when he wasn't looking, questioning his late meetings, and growing paranoid about his female employees. Victor, sensing her suspicion but unaware of its source, became defensive. Their meticulously constructed partnership began to crack, visible in terse exchanges at dinner parties and curt text messages, all captured by Stephanie's surveillance. "They're starting to unravel," Stephanie reported during a secure meeting with Nathan's team. "Last night, I heard them arguing about the timing of the trust fund transfer. Evelyn wants to move faster, but Victor insists on sticking to the original plan." "Perfect," Jesse said, taking notes. "The more they disagree about execution, the more likely they are to make mistakes. And mistakes are exactly what we need." The next phase of the plan was already underway. Anonymous tips suggested Victor was planning to take the money and run, leaving Evelyn behind. Similar whispers reached Victor, hinting that Evelyn had a contingency plan excluding him. Trust, the foundation of their 17-year con, was beginning to crumble, and in its ruins, Nathan's team was building a trap to ensure neither escaped with a penny. The private lab was housed in an unremarkable midtown office building, its plain exterior hiding cutting-edge technology within. Nathan sat in Dr. Sarah Chin's office, staring at the DNA results displayed on her computer screen while Stephanie paced behind him. "The results are conclusive," Dr. Chin said, her professional tone steady despite the tension in the room. "The paternity test confirms that Victor Wallace, or Dennis Maddox, is indeed the biological father of Jason, Emma, and Michael Hawthorne." Nathan nodded, having already accepted this, but the second set of results had frozen Stephanie mid-step. "As for the additional test," Dr. Chin continued, pulling up another screen, The DNA analysis of Mrs. Brady's current pregnancy shows no genetic match to Mr. Maddox. The father is someone else entirely. Stephanie stopped pacing, gripping the back of a chair. I can explain, she began, but Nathan raised a hand. You don't owe me an explanation, Stephanie, he said quietly. But we need to discuss what this means for our plans. Dr. Chin discreetly excused herself, leaving them alone. Stephanie sighed, sinking into a chair. His name is Marcus Torres, she said, her voice tinged with hesitation. He's a literature professor at Columbia. We met at a coffee shop 2 years ago, started talking about books. She smiled faintly. He was the first person in years who really saw me, not just as Victor's quiet wife. Nathan studied her face, reading the mix of fear and defiance. Does Victor know? No, she said emphatically. He barely notices me anymore. He's too focused on his schemes. Her hand rested protectively on her stomach. The pregnancy was unexpected. Marcus and I were careful, but when I found out, I knew I had to tell you. This changes everything. Nathan leaned back, processing the implications. Does Marcus know about Victor? About any of this? He knows I'm married, Stephanie replied, her voice low. He knows it's complicated and that I'm working to leave. But the rest? No. The less he knows, the safer he is. Nathan nodded, glancing out the window at the bustling city below. And the baby? What are your plans? Tears shimmered in Stephanie's eyes, but her voice remained steady. I want this child, Nathan. More than anything, this baby is everything real in my life. Everything my marriage to Victor isn't. Nathan stood, his gaze fixed on the city as he considered the next move in their intricate game. Somewhere out there, his own children, no, Victor's children, were going about their day, carrying secrets too heavy for their young shoulders. The DNA results had confirmed what Nathan already knew, but seeing it laid out in stark, scientific terms made it feel more real. We need to adjust our timeline, he said finally, turning back to face Stephanie. How far along are you? Almost 3 months, she replied. I've been careful to hide it, loose clothes, excuses for morning sickness. But soon it will be impossible to hide, Nathan finished, pulling out his phone and quickly typing a message to Jesse Chambers. This actually works in our favor. Victor's reaction when he finds out about your pregnancy and its timing will add another layer of chaos to their already strained partnership. Stephanie's eyes widened as the strategy became clear. You want to use my pregnancy as part of the plan? Only if you're comfortable with it, Nathan assured her. But think about it. Victor is already dealing with Evelyn's suspicions about his supposed affairs. When he realizes his own wife has been unfaithful, that she's carrying another man's child, he let the implications hang in the air. A slow smile spread across Stephanie's face as she caught on. His ego won't handle it. He'll be distracted, angry, and more likely to make mistakes. Nathan nodded. But more importantly, it gives us leverage to protect you and your baby. Once Victor knows, he'll be too focused on his wounded pride to notice our other moves. He returned to his desk and began organizing the DNA reports into his briefcase. We'll need to arrange for your safety. Victor doesn't handle betrayal well. I've been staying with Marcus more often, Stephanie admitted. Victor thinks I'm at my sister's in Connecticut. He never checks. Good, but we need something more secure, Nathan replied, pulling out one of several burner phones he used for sensitive communication. I'll have Jesse set up a safe house. Once everything comes out, you'll need somewhere safe to go. Stephanie walked to the window, her reflection faint in the glass as twilight deepened. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd never met Victor. If I'd met someone like Marcus first. We can't change the past, Nathan said gently, but we can make the future different. For all of us. He checked his watch. I have dinner with Evelyn and the children tonight. Another performance of the happy family. How do you do it? Stephanie asked suddenly. Sit across from them. Knowing what you know? Nathan was silent for a moment, recalling countless dinners, forced smiles, and careful conversations. I look at the children, he said finally. Everything I'm doing, everything we're all doing, is to give them a chance at a life free from manipulation and lies. They're victims just like us. Stephanie nodded, wiping away a tear. I should go. Victor's expecting me at another charity committee meeting. Another chance to play the devoted wife. Just a little longer, Nathan assured her. Everything's almost in place. Keep gathering evidence. Keep playing your part. And Stephanie, she paused at the door. Be careful. Both of you. After she left, Nathan stayed in his office, reviewing the DNA results one more time. The scientific proof of Victor's paternity and Stephanie's pregnancy seemed to mock the carefully constructed facades they all maintained. But facades, he had learned, could be prisons or weapons. The truth about Stephanie's baby would be another crack in the foundation of lies Victor and Evelyn had built. His phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Don't be late for dinner, darling. I'm making your favorite. Nathan smiled faintly as he typed his response. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The DNA results were tucked safely into his briefcase. One more piece of ammunition in their growing arsenal. The endgame was approaching, and soon, very soon, all the masks would fall. The Hawthorne Enterprises annual shareholders meeting took place in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, a fitting venue for what promised to be the most dramatic corporate presentation in the company's history. Morning sunlight streamed through the crystal chandeliers, casting prismatic patterns across the gathering shareholders, board members, and press. Jessie Chambers stood in the wings of the stage, reviewing her presentation one. Last time, the months of painstaking evidence gathering were condensed into the sleek laptop before her, each slide a carefully prepared blow to Evelyn and Victor's plans. Everything in place? Nathan asked, adjusting his tie as he joined Jessie backstage. His voice was steady, though the faint tremor in his hands betrayed his tension. Jessie nodded, her expression focused. Julie's team is positioned at every exit. The federal agents are in place, disguised as hotel staff. Once we start, no one leaves this room without our knowledge. Through the curtain, they could see Evelyn and Victor taking their seats in the front row. Evelyn wore a cream Chanel suit, her signature style, her smile dazzling as she greeted board members. Victor sat beside her, his confidence evident in his relaxed posture. Neither showed any sign of the strain that had been building between them over the past weeks. They think this is their moment of triumph, Nathan observed quietly. That I'm about to hand them everything they've spent 17 years working to steal. That's exactly what we want them to think, Jessie replied, checking her watch. Stephanie's in position at the back of the room, near the exit. She has a clear view of their faces when it all unfolds. Nathan's phone buzzed, a message from Julie Willard. All accounts monitored, ready to freeze everything on your signal. The room fell silent as the board chairman stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for Hawthorne Enterprises annual shareholders meeting. Before we proceed with regular business, our CEO and founder, Nathan Hawthorne, has a special announcement regarding the company's future. Nathan squared his shoulders and walked onto the stage, his steps deliberate and confident. The applause was enthusiastic. He was, after all, the visionary who had built the company from the ground up, guiding it through multiple industry revolutions. Thank you all for coming, Nathan began, his voice steady and clear. As many of you know, family has always been at the heart of Hawthorne Enterprises. Today, I stand before you to discuss the future of that legacy. In the front row, Evelyn's smile widened. Victor leaned forward slightly, his expression eager. They thought they knew what was coming. The announcement of enhanced trust funds and a transfer of shares that would grant them access to millions. 17 years ago, Nathan continued, I thought I had everything. A loving wife, a trusted best friend, 3 beautiful children. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. What I actually had was an elaborate lie, orchestrated by professional con artists who targeted me for my wealth and position. The room went deathly still. In the front row, Evelyn's smile froze, her face paling. Victor's relaxed posture turned rigid. Jessie. Nathan stepped aside, motioning to his corporate lawyer. I believe you have something to share with our shareholders. Jessie strode to the podium, her heels clicking against the stage floor. The screen behind her came to life, displaying the first of hundreds of damning documents they had gathered. Ladies and gentlemen, Jessie began, her voice sharp and authoritative. What you're about to see is evidence of one of the most intricate fraud schemes in corporate history. The woman you know as Evelyn Hawthorne is, in fact, Dana McMillan, a professional con artist with a long history of elaborate deceptions across multiple states. The screen filled with images of Evelyn's various identities over the years, each linked to a ruined victim. In the front row, Evelyn's complexion turned ashen, her manicured nails digging into the armrests of her chair. Her partner, known to you as Victor Wallace, is actually Dennis Maddox, Jessie continued. Together, they orchestrated a 17-year scheme to defraud not only Nathan Hawthorne personally, but Hawthorne Enterprises as a whole. Victor began to rise from his seat, but a hotel security guard, who was actually a federal agent, stepped forward, silently signaling him to remain seated. Over the past 17 years, Jessie pressed on, advancing the slides, they systematically siphoned money through a network of shell companies. Our forensic accountants have traced over $50 million in fraudulent transfers, all funneled into accounts in the Cayman Islands. The screen now displayed transaction records, each highlighted in damning red. Evelyn turned sharply toward Victor, her expression venomous. This particular revelation was clearly news to her. But financial fraud was just the beginning, Jessie continued, her tone steely. We also have evidence of multiple attempts on Mr. Hawthorne's life, each designed to trigger massive insurance payouts. We have documentation of falsified medical records, witness tampering, and systematic emotional abuse of minor children, Jessie announced, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. Several shareholders gasped as the evidence mounted, each piece more damning than the last. Security footage, bank records, secret recordings, all played across the screen in an unrelenting display of proof. Perhaps most shocking, Jessie continued, her tone taking on a controlled edge of anger, is the elaborate deception regarding Mr. Hawthorne's children. Through falsified birth records and years of manipulation, they convinced him he was the father of 3 children who were actually fathered by Dennis Maddox himself. In the back of the room, Stephanie watched as her husband's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Victor's expression shifted from confident to calculating to desperate in mere moments. She placed a protective hand over her stomach, knowing their legal team's first act would be filing for emergency divorce and protection orders. Federal agents are present in this room, Jessie declared, gesturing toward the security staff now surrounding Evelyn and Victor. They have warrants for multiple charges, including wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. But before they are taken into custody, Mr. Hawthorne has a few final words. Nathan stepped back to the podium, his expression a mix of sadness and resolve. To our shareholders, he began, every penny stolen will be recovered. To our employees, your jobs and pensions are secure. And to my wife and best friend. He turned to face them directly, his voice unyielding. The game is over. Hannah Wise has been working for me for months. Every move you've made, every plan you've crafted, it's all been documented and shared with federal prosecutors. Evelyn shot to her feet, her carefully maintained demeanor finally cracking. You fool, she screamed, her voice echoing through the ballroom. Everything I did was for us. We could have had it all. Mrs. Hawthorne, one of the federal agents said as he stepped forward, or should I say, Ms. McMillan, please come with us. The room erupted into chaos as Evelyn and Victor were escorted away in handcuffs, their protests drowned out by the shocked murmurs of the shareholders. Camera flashes lit the room, capturing the dramatic moment for tomorrow's headlines. Jessie began fielding questions from board members, while Julie's team moved swiftly to secure electronic records. Nathan stood silently at the podium, watching as 17 years of deceit unraveled under the harsh light of truth. His phone buzzed. A message from Stephanie. The children are safe. Miriam Bass is with them. It's time for the next phase. Nathan nodded to himself. The legal trap had been executed perfectly, but the hardest part still lay ahead. In a private conference room 12 floors above the chaos, Miriam Bass worked to create a calming environment. The experienced family counselor had arranged comfortable chairs in a circle, provided water and snacks, and replaced the harsh overhead lighting with softer lamps. Jason, Emma, and Michael Hawthorne sat huddled together on a small sofa, their body language betraying their anxiety. At 17, Jason shared Victor's height and build, but none of his usual confidence was evident today. 15-year-old Emma kept nervously smoothing her skirt, while 13-year-old Michael seemed to shrink into himself, trying to disappear. Your father, Nathan, will be joining us soon, Miriam said gently, using the language they had agreed upon for this delicate moment. But first, I want you to know that this is a safe space. Nothing you say here will be used against you or anyone else. We're here to talk, to understand, and to begin healing. Jason let out a bitter laugh, so different from his usual upbeat demeanor. Healing? Our whole life has been a lie. How do you heal from that? The door opened, and Nathan entered, his face lined with the emotional toll of the morning's events. The children stiffened, years of conditioning, leaving them uncertain about how to react now that the truth was out. May I sit? He asked quietly, gesturing to an empty chair across from them. When they nodded, he lowered himself into the seat, loosening his tie. I know this morning has been overwhelming, he began. Did you know? Emma's voice was barely audible, but the weight of her question hung heavy in the room. All this time, did you know we weren't really yours? Nathan leaned forward, his gaze intense. Listen to me, all of you, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Biology doesn't make a father. Love does. Choice does, Nathan said, his voice steady but full of emotion. Every bedtime story, every soccer game, every science fair project, those were real. My love for you has always been real. He paused, looking at his children. But we lied to you. Michael spoke for the first time, his voice cracking. For years we knew, and we didn't tell you. Because he threatened you, Nathan said softly. Because Victor, your biological father, told you he'd separate you if you spoke up. The words hung in the air like smoke. Jason's composure finally broke, tears streaming down his face. He said if we ever told you the truth, he'd make sure we never saw each other again. That he had friends in family court who would make sure we were sent to different foster homes. Emma reached for her brother's hand, her own tears falling. We wanted to tell you so many times, Dad, especially after the skiing accident, Nathan finished. When you realized they were trying to kill me. Michael made a choke sound. Mom, Evelyn. She said it was for the best. That once you were gone, we'd all be taken care of. But we didn't want that. We didn't want any of it. Miriam watched the exchange carefully, noting the body language and the raw emotions flowing beneath their words. Jason, she said gently, you seem to have carried an especially heavy burden as the oldest. Jason wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, looking younger than his 17 years. I was supposed to convince Dad, Nathan, to increase the trust funds. Victor said he threatened Emma and Michael specifically. Nathan said, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. That's why you've been so anxious these past months. Why your grades were slipping. Jason nodded miserably. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Knowing what they were planning, trying to protect them, trying to keep everyone happy. Nathan moved to the sofa, sitting beside his children. After a moment's hesitation, they leaned into him, like they had when they were small, seeking comfort they weren't sure they deserved. Listen to me, he said firmly. None of this was your fault. You were victims in this just as much as I was, more so, because you were children manipulated and threatened by the adults who should have protected you. But what happens now? Emma asked, her voice small. Are they going to take us away? No, Nathan said fiercely. Never. I am legally your father, regardless of biology. And I swear to you, no one will ever separate you. Not Victor, not Evelyn, not anyone. Miriam leaned forward, her expression gentle but serious. There will be challenges ahead. The legal proceedings, the media attention, the need to process all of this trauma. But you don't have to face any of it alone. We've arranged for you to speak with counselors, together and individually, Nathan added. People who specialize in helping families heal from this kind of deception. And I'll be right there with you, every step of the way. But how can you even want us? Michael burst out. After everything, knowing we're his. Because you're not his, Nathan interrupted. You're mine, not by blood, but by choice, by love, by 17 years of memories and moments that no one can take away from us. He looked each child in the eye. The question is, do you still want me to be your father? The response was immediate and overwhelming.